Hey everybody, welcome back to the tavern. I'm Kamari, and today we're going to talk about seasons and ARPGs, and more specifically, Diablo 4. We're going to talk about what seasons are, if they're good or bad, and what Blizzard should do to do them differently. So this is going to be a pretty quick video, so please stick around to the end to help out my average viewer duration, and to get some really cool info along the way. And as a bonus, if you stick around to the very end, I'll tell you the worst and funniest thing about seasons in Diablo 4. So let's get started. Okay, so what are seasons in ARPGs? Well, typically seasons are when new realms are made, where everyone has to make fresh new characters that start over as if you had never played the game and just installed the game for the first time. One of the biggest draws to seasons are leaderboards. Because everyone's starting fresh with brand new characters and seasons only last a limited amount of time, usually 10 to 15 weeks depending on the game you're playing, it creates a competitive environment where not only are people trying to race to max level as quickly as possible, they're also trying to clear the hardest content in the game for a higher place on the leaderboard when the season ends. So PoE kind of changed the meta when it comes to seasons, and the way they did that was by releasing expansions alongside their seasons, and then once the season ended, that expansion content would be released into the full game, and this was vast amount of content. It'd be new crafting systems, or portals that took you to alternate realms where you would kill elite monsters that would give you some type of material that in some way fed into the in-game progression. There was something like Farmville going on for a little while where you would plant these different types of plants, and that tied back into another crafting system. One of the coolest seasons I played in Path of Exile was one where they had you go literally Ocean's 11 and assemble these crews of NPCs to go pull off heists, and it was really cool content. They started introducing that into seasons, which kind of shifted the expectations for veteran ARPG players to expect lots of content to come with new seasons. Now on paper, this sounds fantastic, right? Because the game over time is getting bigger and bigger and better. Well, yes and no. I say yes because players love new content and having new in-game progression systems to interact with, and having new routes to take that all intertwined into a complex endgame. That's what we like, a good endgame. However, over the years, even veteran Path of Exile players will tell you that Path of Exile has become extremely bloated and too complex, making it extremely unfriendly to a new player to the game, much less a new player to ARPGs in general. So it's a very well thought out dynamic endgame with lots and lots and lots and lots of content. However, it can become so overwhelming, even for veteran ARPG players. If you're not a veteran Path of Exile player, the game can be overwhelming and have too high of a barrier to entry. Another thing to note is it's not like the game's actually getting bigger. It's more like you're cramming more things into the same amount of space. So like a bag that you're putting too many things into, eventually the bag just can't withhold that anymore and will burst. However, in this game, the bursting is a metaphor for the game just being too complex for even veteran ARPG players to hop in and play and be at any type of competitive or knowledgeable level about the game, because there's just too many systems to wrap your head around until you've played this game for like a year. So how does this tie back into Diablo 4? Well, I'm so glad you asked, because in order to see how it affects Diablo 4, first we got to travel back in time and take a look at Diablo 3. If Path of Exile was introducing too much content through seasons, you could say that Diablo 3 was doing the exact opposite. See, Diablo 3 introduced almost no new content through any of its seasons. In fact, it's been a major player complaint with comparisons being drawn to Path of Exile for a long time. The reason for that is throughout all of its seasons, every season Diablo 3 would make a few changes to how set items worked, or buff a class or nerf a class, and maybe introduce one or two legendaries if you were really lucky. The most notable thing that ever came with a season that I remember was a couple seasons ago. If you got a high enough kill streak, Diablo would spawn and you'd have to fight him in whatever dungeon you were in. Now that doesn't include the newest season where they actually have gone and introduced an entirely new aspect to the game that can change the way your progression works a little bit. I do think it's kind of ironic that they wait to introduce any new content to the game until Diablo 4 releases, making it almost pointless. However, I digress. Let's move on. So now we have two ARPGs. We have Path of Exile, who has introduced too much content, and we have Diablo 3, who introduced no content. So that brings us to Diablo 4. Now, Diablo 4 is arguably the most played ARPG ever, and if it's not the most played ever, it's definitely the most played at launch. So what that means is you have a lot of people who have never even played ARPGs who just saw commercials for the game, heard about it from a friend, saw some promotional advertisement somewhere, and decided to give the game a try, and they are now playing the game, which is great. The downside to that is they've probably never played a game other than like Fortnite that had anything like seasons in it. Now, in other games like Battle Royales or any other game with seasonal content that's not an ARPG, you typically don't lose anything. That's just a way of saying, hey, new content is coming. They just introduce it in seasons so they can put in a new battle pass. However, with ARPGs, that means a brand new character and all this kind of stuff. So the way Blizzard has tried to negate all of the complaints they're getting about this is they are doing something that I've never seen done in an ARPG, and that's they're letting you keep a lot of the progress that you've made on your Eternal Realm character on your Seasonal Realm character. And I think this can be both a good and a bad thing, and we'll go into why for both of those. So Blizzard have come out and said that basically nothing except your character and your level are going to be reset. You're going to keep a lot of other stuff. Altars of Lilith, keep them. Map exploration, forget about it. Renown, we should have Renown. They were going to let us keep it. The campaign, the only campaign you're going to have to do around here is playing Diablo Immortal because you campaign to win. Get it? Because you have to pay. Can pay to. Anyways, now this could be a really good thing or a really bad thing. So let's discuss both. If seasons are going to add sweeping changes like new progression systems, new skill systems, new crafting systems, new dungeons, new story, stuff like that, then I absolutely think that the refresh is fine. It'll bring enough new content into the game to keep people hooked, and I think it'll be okay. However, they do need to try to figure out a way to mitigate the problem with Path of Exile, and that is people wanting those new systems brought over to the Eternal Realms, and then eventually the game just becomes overbloated and bogged down with too many systems. So they'll really need to handpick what they decide to bring over. And so now for the major negative aspect I see of this. So who does this like affect the most? Who does this hurt, allowing all this stuff to carry over with the Altars of Lilith and basically all the chore items you would normally have to do when restarting on a season? Well, the answer I think to that is competitive players, because I guarantee you the leaderboards are going to look completely different than they would have looked had you still had to find all the Altars of Lilith, had you had to go back and get all the renown, had you had to go through and play the campaign. And that's because people probably already did before this announcement, so I assume they're probably pissed, but people would have to map out when is the best time to do campaign missions, when should I do these side quests, when should I go after Altars of Lilith, how much renown do I need to spend time focusing on, at what level thresholds do I want to get more renown, do I want to get more Altars of Lilith, when does it become like super beneficial? Like min-maxing every step of the way to have that high spot on the leaderboard. And, you know, rightfully so, because they're investing hours into not only playing the game on release of a season, they're investing many, many hours into the planning, the coordination, getting their group, getting everybody, because they'd probably be doing it in groups, getting everyone in their group on the same page, having spreadsheets, having Word documents detailing everything they're going to be doing down to the second. Sleep cycles, schedules, which there probably will be, but it won't take nearly as long, so it won't be nearly as much of that. That's who I think this really affects the most, and probably who we're going to see be the most upset by this. So how does Blizzard mitigate this? You've got all these high-end, super competitive players that love that thing, that min-maxing and that, you know, getting planning and everything, kind of like Race to World First with World of Warcraft, where it's planned out months in advance if they can. And people who are, you know, kind of crying about, oh, what do you mean I'm going to have to go and find the Altars of Lilith? What do you mean I'm going to have to do side quests again? What do you mean I'm going to have to, you know, play the game again? We kind of have to figure out what is the right answer. Well, I don't have to figure anything out. Blizzard has to figure out what is the right answer. And I think the right answer is 2 separate seasonal realms. Just think of some clever Diablo name for it. You have the casual seasonal realm where only your character and your level are reset. The new seasonal mechanics are in the game. You can interact with that, but really only the level and the character itself are reset. You have to go through re-leveling, you know, stuff like that. And then you have another realm where everything is reset. And this is for like the hardcore competitive players. This is for your, you know, top 1, 2, 3 percenters who want to really, really compete, who want to map this stuff out, who want to be able to say, hey, on a complete reset, I'm, you know, the best, or the top 10 or the top 100, top 1,000. Although don't count on the top 1,000 because Blizzard's proved that they can't keep track of a full 1,000 people, as shown by the statue. But it really shows. And then for people who really, really want prestige, they can compete on both. Like imagine being high ranked on both of those leaderboards and the prestige that would come with that. Another thing is I think that breeds healthy and good competition, because as it is right now with only one seasonal realm, a lot of people are going to say things like that. Like, hey, yeah, anyone can right click their way through the same dungeon and whirlwind everything down to get, top 100. You just have more time than I do. But if you just have, a stronger character, you got better RNG than I did with your drops, versus having to take the time to plan all this stuff out, where that kind of thing, like actual planning and smart thinking, would become a bigger factor than just who got better drops along the way, which is essentially kind of what it's going to turn into on like the race to the first 100 or the first 100 100s, and then the race to the best gear. You're closing the gap between skill and luck. And I don't think that's necessarily a great thing. So I think with two separate realms, you have people who want to just, I just want to interact with the new content. I don't care about being competitive. I don't want to have to redo all the chores. Then you have the people who do want to be competitive. They do want to play through all that again. And they want that prestige of being on a complete fresh slate. They want to be number one. So I think that the two different realms is the best solution. All right, so we're about at the end of the video, but a promise is a promise. So the best and worst thing about Diablo 4 seasons that I see happening in the future, maybe 5 or 6 seasons down the road is when we'll first see it, is that Blizzard said this.
Initially, no. Like initially, the version of the melee mechanics that you're seeing are not planned to show up in the Eternal Realm. However, we are reserving the right as developers that if we see something cool and we think, wow, this is just fantastic, this should just be part of the game, that we will just make it part of the game. So it is absolutely an option. Some mechanics you might see in future seasons.
Which, if you're new to the Blizzard Activision community, I guess we have here, what that really means is in about 5 or 6 seasons, when they don't feel like developing new content for it, or they're burnt out or tired, they're going to recycle the older content and say it's backed by popular demand. Like, oh, you guys just loved this, so we're doing the Malignant thing again. Or we're doing the, whatever they do next season. They'll just, I don't be surprised to see multiple seasons with recycled content. I hope that doesn't happen, because the Diablo 4 devs have done a pretty good job up till now. But Blizzard, at the end of the day, is going to Blizzard, and I wouldn't be surprised to see that at all. So those are my thoughts. Please like and sub and stuff. It really helps me out. I really hope you watch to the end. My average viewer duration really needs to go up. Check out my playlist, the Should You Play It, where I break down the first 3 hours of games and decide if they're worth your time investment to get to the end game of those games. And of course, have a great week.